Hello and welcome back to the seventh part of our series, Real-Time Integration with Salesforce webinar. My name is Sean Fatuhi, and I'm also joined by Brad Brown, our Senior Integration Solution Consultant. You will remember Brad helped us deliver a webinar last month where he created an integration from scratch. And well, he's at it again. However, this time we will be doing that in the context of building a real-time integration with Salesforce. As always, we appreciate you taking the time away from your busy schedule to be with us today. We're going to do everything we can, and our intention is to make it worthwhile for you. And with that said, so let's go ahead and get quickly started with the agenda. Again, since this is part of a series of interconnected demos of Jitterbit Harmony, I'll give you a very quick intro for these sessions so you can see what these webinars are and what they're not. We will also spend majority of our time in the product with help of Brad. And after Brad is done, I'll provide you more information about our upcoming events so that if there is interest from your side for those webinars, you can register for them. Finally, we'll spend the last 5 minutes to answer any questions you have. For questions, please submit them via the Q&A functionality within Zoom. We will address them during the last 5 minutes. If we don't get to all your questions, we will compile the questions and provide the answer to each one of them as a follow-up. And you know, over the past month or so where we've been doing these webinars, we've been able to get all the questions addressed during this session. So let's go ahead and before I pass it to Brad for his demo, I just want to make sure again I cover what these webinars are and what they're not. These sessions are really meant to be focused on the product with you know, no emphasis on sales or marketing. It's tend to be more technical compared to some of the other webinars you might have joined. They're meant to be very educational in a very casual, no pressure manner. Everything you see is live, so there's no smoke and mirror, and these are meant to be very concise and short and to the point, so it's a good use of your time. As you'll see, these webinars are also chained together so we can tell a story, and that usually we've gotten great feedback from you guys on these sessions. Now, what we will demonstrate today is building a real-time integration between Salesforce and database by first creating an outbound message in Salesforce and apply a workflow rule to trigger an API that we created in Jitterbit. We will then create a new project that will accept the data from Salesforce and insert it into a SQL database. Finally, we test our integration by creating a record in Salesforce and expect that results to be automatically and in real time be available in the database. Now, I hope, Brad, I didn't steal your thunder about going through the use case, but if you want to provide a quick overview with some visuals.
Sure, yeah. So first, the two endpoints we have are Salesforce and a database. It's going to be a Postgres database, could be any database, or could be other applications. It doesn't have to be a database. So first, what we're going to do is go ahead and create, so the first step there is going to be create the outbound message, kind of walk you through that process in Salesforce, what it takes to create that outbound message and a rule. And then second, we're going to go ahead and create the operation inside of Jitterbit. So, you know, from scratch, creating the operation that's going to accept that payload and then expose it as an API. And then finally, once that is exposed, we're going to go ahead and create that sample data in Salesforce to watch that point 3 there. Yep, create that new account and watch it flow from Salesforce into the database automatically. So with that being said, I will go ahead and take control here, Sean. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Take over here. All right, so what we've got here is Jitterbit, but let's go ahead and start by going into Salesforce. So I've got an account here prepped, haven't hit submit yet, but what we're going to do is set up the workflow rule. And so workflow rules here. I don't have any currently created, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. And this is where you choose the object. So with workflow rules, it is tied specifically to objects. So then we're going to go ahead and next. Go ahead and give it a name. And then we're going to go ahead and supply some rules. So it does require you have at least one rule. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying it must have a name in order to go across. If you use the advanced formula evaluation to true, you can actually get more granular. If you only want to trigger the operation if a specific field or set of fields are updated, or if a box is checked, something like that, you can do through, if it's not available here in a direct, field selection, you can also do it through their evaluates to true to write those formulas as well. All right, so this creates the rule. Now what we're going to do is tie this to an outbound message. So I'm going to go ahead and create that new outbound message. Give it a name. For the URL, for right now, since we don't actually have the API created, I'm just going to head and put it to jitterbit.com, and it's going to be sending as me. You could send it as a different person. Really is up to your needs. By default, it will select the ID, but we're going to go ahead and do street, state, postal code, city, and then the name as well. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and save this. By default, when you create these rules and the outbound message, the rule is not active by default. So it's not gonna be triggering anything until we actually activate it. But what this gives us the ability to do is to come in here and actually get the WSDL. So this WSDL is a, view the source here so I don't get all the XML tags from Chrome, and then we'll do a save as. I'm just going to grab this here. I'm just going to overwrite this one I was testing against, so we're going to replace that. So this is what's going to be the source for our structure inside of Jitterbit. So this defines the fields that are coming across. If you do have different fields you need, by default, you can only pull fields from the object that is being edited. But there's an option that I'll talk about later if you do want an object and related fields, how we can do that inside of Jitterbit as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump over to Jitterbit. And this is kind of the landing page. We've talked about Management Studio, Citizen Integrator, API Manager, and Cloud Studio. Today, we're going to be focusing mainly on Cloud Studio and API Manager. So first, we're going to go ahead and jump in and create the operation that's going to accept this payload.
There you go with a fun way of doing live demos.
Yep. There we go. And then pulling up this project here. So this is one that I used last time. We're going to use it just so that our endpoints are configured, things like that. So we'll have our Salesforce and Postgres already configured for us. We're going to go ahead and start. We're going to be accepting a SOAP request based on the fact that we had a WSDL there. We know it's going to be SOAP. So we're going to accept a SOAP request, and then we're going to be taking that and writing it off into a database. Again, we're going to a database, but you could easily make this another application, or you could make it a set of operations, such as you want to insert it into the database and update another system. You can string them together to make it as complex as you'd like. So first, I'm going to go ahead and define the table that we're going to be using. So I'm going to go ahead and pull back my customer demo table. And this is asking, since I choose upsert, this is just asking which field is going to be the key. So this is just telling it, so if I'm doing an update against the database, it checks to make sure that that record doesn't exist. If it does, it'll just do an update instead of an insert. So the database is configured. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the API. So here, I'm going to go ahead and grab that one we've got created here. And we've got the port service. All this information is available in the WSDL. This is a very simple WSDL. Can be used other SOAP endpoints that you may want to replicate. So you're deprecating a SOAP API and you want to use Jitterbit's API, you can actually provide that and then start serving up those WSDL endpoints as well. And here's going to be the structure of the envelope we're going to be receiving. All right, and then we just need to map between the two. So grab the ones that auto map. ID, we actually want it to go to the Salesforce ID, and then something like billing, zip code, and street, and then finally name, company name. Go ahead and do a little bit of, again, using those functions that we have access to. I'm gonna go ahead and just do a simple function here just so that, you know, showing some of the capabilities of our translation layer. So if you're having to modify things as they come into the system, or maybe you have to do a lookup, things like that can all be done through this scripting language here. So with that done, this looks good. So we're gonna go ahead and return to workflow. And now SAP is kind of unique, or I'm sorry, Salesforce is kind of unique because it does require you send a response back, or it will keep trying to send you, you know, the request for 24 hours. So you do want to send a response back to Salesforce, letting them know that it was successfully received. Or if you had an error, you could actually respond with false, so that it does try later. You know, say your database is down or the endpoint you're working with, you may want to not acknowledge it and give it an error so that it does retry, you know, during that 24-hour period. So here, go ahead and grab that WSDL again. And this will be on the response side of it. So this is what Salesforce is expecting back. Add that transformation in here. And so for now, we're just going to go ahead and set that to true. All right, just giving these some names so that I can easily find them. And then go ahead and tie them together so that on success of one, the other one will fire. All right, so this is ready to be deployed. Deploying it actually puts it out there so that we can then expose it as an API. All right, so it has been deployed. Now we will go ahead and jump over here to our API manager. So go ahead and do a new API. And from here, choose our webinars environment. Go ahead and give it a version, just in case you do want to version it, you can do that as well. And I'm going to enable logging and debugging just so we get a little bit more information that we can show you during the demo as well. And then we're going to do our Salesforce account outbound, and we're going to be accepting a post. From my knowledge, all Salesforce requests are going to be a post, but you can choose all if you choose. And then I'm going to do final target as well. Here, I'm going to go ahead and select roles. This is if you were on our previous ones, you might have not noticed this, or it might have been added, but we now restrict it so you can, depending on your role, you can actually limit who has access to see endpoints and edit them as well. All right, from here, I'm going to go ahead and save and publish. So this creates that URL that we're actually going to want to use in our outbound message. So got the URL now. We're going to come back here, update that with the correct information. All right, so now that we have the full URL, we can actually go ahead and activate that workflow rule. All right, so now this is active. I'm just going to check my database just to make sure I don't have anything in there. And we're going to go ahead and go back to that new account. So Jitterbit mini demos and an address have been put on there. Again, those are just the fields I chose. You could be sending, if you have any custom fields or anything you want to send, you could sync those as well. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. All right, from here, it is triggering that outbound message through APIs. It'll show up there, and then you'll also be able to see it in the logs as that request comes in. Some detail about it. You'll also see the raw payload that was accepted as well. So if we come over here to our database, we see that new record in here, capitalized, and everything is looking good. So that's quick and easy how easy it is now as you edit these accounts or change them. Those changes will be replicated in the database real time. So if you do have edits and things like that, you'll see those showing up pretty much instantly as it comes across. And I did mention earlier, this is great if all you're doing is, working with a single object inside of Jitterbit. It's a very flat structure where you only wanted to get the data on that single object. There are sometimes you may want to pull back additional fields. So one of the practices that we do talk about in Jitterbit is also, instead of getting all the fields, sometimes you just want to get the ID, and then you can use your typical Salesforce connector to actually query back into the database and query into the database, grab all the information, whether it be parent objects, child objects, pull that information and sync it like you normally would. But instead of doing it on a schedule, it's get this specific ID and run that real time. So very similar to the look it would have on this page would be what we would use if we do it for that specific ID. All right, with that, that has been, how to create an outbound message with Jitterbit in real time. With that, I will go ahead and pass it back over to you, Sean.
Excellent. And this has probably speaks volume in terms of ease of use. We were able to do it in, 13 minutes, I want to say. So thank you for doing that quickly for us. As we've shared with you in the past, we're looking forward to hearing from you and getting your feedback in terms of improving these sessions and topics. I will go ahead and paste our feedback process into the chat. So that way, if you have a chance to do that right now, we would certainly appreciate it. This is the one if you guys can see it, actually, let me make sure it goes to everybody this time. There is a link for the feedback. Tell us what other topics you want us to cover. Some of these topics are driven by the feedback that you're providing. Especially this one, we had quite a few people that wanted to see live integration with Salesforce. As far as what's coming up, we have one next week that covers employee onboarding and offboarding. That's part of our Jitterbit process templates that we provide to our customers out of the box. On September 9th, we will be doing SAP integration in minutes. And the week after that, we're doing NetSuite integration in minutes. So if any of those systems are of interest to you, please let us know and register for them. I will be also putting on chat a link to getting the latest information on these and registering for them. With that said, I do want to let you know that we have set up an email to help you with questions that may come up. You can directly communicate to us by sending us an email at techwebinars@jitterbit.com. We have quite a few engineers watching that and making sure that we address all your questions. And with that said, I've been kind of looking at the Q&A session or this Q&A queue to look at some of the questions that come up, and we'll address them as they've been posted. So just bear with me. All right, the first question came from initials PM. Can we automate the process of going back to Salesforce by querying the data from database? Do you want to take a stab at that, Brad?
So you broke up a little bit on me there, Sean. What was that one?
Can we automate the process of going back to Salesforce by querying data from database?
Yeah, so that is definitely one of the options as well, is once it's inserted, grabbing that data and putting that back into Salesforce if you do want that ID in the database. If you want to actually trigger it off the database, that would require, some databases support kind of a REST outbound call. You would have to leverage something like that if you wanted, where it was triggered as records were going into your database to go to Salesforce. That would depend on the support of that end system. If it's a database, some support it, some don't. It really depends on the technology.
Great, thank you. LJ asks, can we manipulate the data as it does? I think he meant as it goes from Salesforce to database, since our database has a different schema at Salesforce. That question might have come in before you did the function call where you made it uppercase, but anything else you would add?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be split. We were going to a single table, but say you have a record that actually needs to be split amongst multiple tables. That can all be done during that transformation process as well.
Got it. Okay. TA asks, I attended your connector builder session. Can this process be added to the workflow? I'm assuming that the question is, can a connector builder operation be added to this workflow instead of out of the box connectors? I guess I think that's how I read that question.
Yeah, and really we were just using database for ease, just to show the data flowing. But really, it could be any of the connectors, whether they're the ones that we've connected, whether the connector builders, or even standards based. If you're just using our standards REST or SOAP connector as well, you can integrate those into the flow.
Great, thank you. SK asks, we are heavy users of Jitterbit Desktop Designer. Will this apply to that designer as well? And there's a follow-up question. Will you have a session on Desktop Designer? So I'll address, if you don't mind, Brad, I'll address the second question first. As far as doing a session on Desktop Designer, we do have a lot of customers that use the installed version of our designer instead of using a browser. If there is enough interest for it, we absolutely would love to do a session on that to get everybody introduced to it. From a design perspective, you do have options. Some people prefer a download version of a designer versus doing it via, doing it through a thick client versus a thin client, like a browser-based designer. So yeah, if there is enough interest, we'll definitely do a session on the Desktop Designer as well, since you do have a choice. I guess, will this apply to the designer as well, or the Desktop Designer? I think that's the question, Brad.
Yeah, and it absolutely does. It sounds like you probably don't use APIs yet with Jitterbit, but the same kind of methodology would definitely apply when you're working with the desktop. And if you're interested, reach out to your success manager, and they can definitely set something up where we can show you that functionality as well.
Yeah, and for those who may be confused by the question in terms of desktop designer, I just want to reiterate the fact that we do have content available if you're interested in learning more about the designer, the thick client. There's plenty of content available on our YouTube channel. But again, we'll look at some of the feedback we get, and we can potentially do a session specifically to our desktop designer. So thank you for that question, and appreciate being a customer. JF asked, can this be used outside of Salesforce if you want to replace an existing SOAP API? Brad, I think you may understand that question better than I can.
Yeah, so we've had customers do that before. They're sunsetting maybe an older application that they were exposing SOAP APIs, but they want to switch over to a different platform. What we can do is very similar to what we did here. Instead of only having option to one of the packages, you would actually, or one of the file format there, you would actually have a drop down of anything that you expose or expect to receive via your SOAP API. So you can create different flows based on what you want to happen when somebody calls those different operations. So you can fully build that out inside of Jitterbit using a very similar technique to what we just saw here today.
Excellent. Thank you very much. With that said, that was the last question we had. So we're happy that we were able to do this pretty quickly, and we'll give you 3 minutes back to your busy schedule. And we hope we see you next time. You will get an email later, I think it's tomorrow, where you have links for the feedback as well as the link to registration page. And I've posted that on the chat as well if you're interested to complete that today. Hope everybody has a great and safe rest of the day, and we'll see you next week.